First contact failure. The silence in the United Nations Security Council chamber was deafening. On the massive display dominating the wall, a swarm of objects decelerated as they approached Earth orbit. Not meteors, not satellites, ships, alien ships. 17 minutes ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected these vessels, decelerating from what appears to be faster than light travel. General Hammond said, his voice steady despite the implications of his words. Current count stands at 73 vessels of varying sizes. The largest is approximately 3 kilometers in length. The Secretary General leaned forward. Have they responded to our attempts at communication? No, Madam Secretary. We've broadcast on all frequencies using mathematical sequences, basic language patterns, and even replayed their own transmissions back at them. Nothing. Dr. Maya Chen sat at the far end of the table, her presence unusual for such high-level meetings. At 34, she was already considered the foremost expert in quantum mechanics and the architect behind Project Vanguard, humanity's experimental quantum defense system. She tapped her tablet, sending data to the main screen. The energy readings from those ships are off the charts, she said, pointing to fluctuating graphs. Whatever propulsion system they're using, it's manipulating space-time in ways we've only theorized. And those weapons' signatures. She hesitated. If my calculations are correct, their smallest vessel could level a city in seconds. The room erupted in voices until the Secretary General raised her hand. What are our options, General? We've mobilized every available military asset. But realistically, Hammond shook his head. We're outmatched. Our most advanced fighters would be like biplanes against stealth bombers. My team has been accelerating development on the Quantum Vanguard, Dr. Chen interjected. It's not combat ready, but the principles are sound. If we could deploy even a prototype. The general interrupted. Your project is theoretical at best, Doctor. We need practical solutions now. The debate was silenced by a flash on the display. One of the smaller alien vessels had fired on a military satellite. The satellite didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, leaving not even debris. That was a warning shot, Commander Elijah Jackson said from his position near the door. As head of Earth's Rapid Response Force, his presence was both expected and necessary. They could have targeted population centers, but chose military hardware instead. They're sending a message. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't simple explorers. This was an invasion force. 12 hours later, humanity's first battle against an alien species was going poorly. The Krell, as they called themselves in their first and only communication, had superiority in every domain. Their ships moved in patterns that defied conventional physics, their weapons bypassed Earth's best defenses, and their tactics suggested centuries of warfare experience. Commander Jackson stood in the smoking ruins of what had been Joint Base Andrews, watching the remnants of his squadron retreat to fallback positions. The sky above was scared with contrails and the occasional flash of weapons fire. In less than half a day, Earth's combined air forces had been reduced by 60%. Commander, a voice called from behind. Jackson turned to see Dr. Chen running toward him, clutching a hardened case. Her lab coat was singed, and a cut above her eye had left a trail of dried blood down her cheek. Doctor, what are you doing here? This is an active combat zone. The Quantum Vanguard, she gasped, catching her breath. I've got the prototype control system. General Hammond authorized emergency deployment. Jackson frowned. I thought it wasn't ready. It's not, but it's all we have. The calculations show it might work, and might is better than what we have now, which is nothing. A Krell fighter screamed overhead, its engines emitting a sound that seemed to vibrate at the atomic level. Both humans instinctively ducked. What exactly does this prototype do? Jackson asked, eyeing the case. Chen's eyes lit up despite the dire circumstances. It manipulates quantum fields to create localized reality distortions. In theory, it can disrupt their weapons, shields, even their navigation systems. but it needs to be mounted on our most advanced platform, the Artemis. Jackson nodded, understanding immediately. The Artemis was Earth's experimental deep space vessel, currently hidden in a hardened bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. It had been designed to take humans to Mars in weeks rather than months, but its maiden voyage had been postponed due to budget constraints. Yes, and I need your help to get there. The journey to the Artemis facility was harrowing. Krell ground forces had begun landing in strategic locations worldwide, their armor seemingly impervious to conventional weapons. Only concentrated fire from multiple heavy weapons could penetrate their defenses, and even then, it was like trying to bring down a tank with pistols. Jackson's team, what remained of it, escorted Dr. Chen through mountain passes and underground tunnels, avoiding main roads where Krell patrols hunted for human resistance. When they finally reached the facility, they found it remarkably intact. "They don't know about this place," Chen said as they descended in the massive elevator that would take them to the hangar. "Or they don't consider it a threat." "Let's hope it's the former," Jackson replied grimly. The Artemis was beautiful in a utilitarian way. Sleek lines designed for minimal resistance, experimental engines that promised to revolutionize space travel, and a hull made of materials that could withstand the harshest conditions of space. It wasn't designed for combat, but it was humanity's most advanced vessel. "We'll need a crew," Jackson said, surveying the ship. "Already here, Commander," a voice echoed through the hangar. Captain Lian Wei stepped forward from a group of personnel who had been maintaining the Artemis during its storage. "We received orders from what's left of command. The Artemis is yours." Jackson nodded. "Dr. Chen has a payload that needs integration with the ship's systems. How quickly can you make that happen?" We looked at Chen's case with curiosity. "Depends on what it is." "Quantum field manipulator," Chen said. "It needs to interface with your power systems and sensor array." Wei whistled. "That's not a simple patch job, but given the circumstances." She glanced at a screen showing satellite feeds of the ongoing invasion. "We'll make it work. Give us 3 hours." "We don't have 3 hours," Jackson said, pointing to the screen where a large Krell vessel was moving into position above the mountain range where they were hidden. "I think we've got less than one." Chen opened her case, revealing a complex array of crystalline structures and circuitry that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. "Then we'd better get started." The launch was anything but smooth. The facility's camouflage systems failed just as the Artemis's engines were spooling up, drawing the attention of Krell forces. As the massive hangar doors slid open, enemy fighters were already screaming toward them. "All hands, brace for emergency ascent," Jackson called from the command seat. The Artemis wasn't designed for atmospheric combat maneuvers, but they had no choice. "Captain Wei, give me everything those engines have." The ship lurched upward, its experimental drives generating forces that pushed against the boundaries of what its structure could withstand. Behind them, the hangar erupted in flames as Krell weapons found their mark. "Multiple hostiles on R6, the tactical officer shouted. "Energy signatures building. They're preparing to fire." "Dr. Chen," Jackson called out. Chen was hunched over a hastily assembled interface panel, her fingers flying across controls that merged her prototype with the ship's systems. "Almost there. The alignment is tricky. The quantum fields need to be precisely tuned, or they'll collapse." The ship shuddered as a glancing hit from a Krell weapon struck its aft section. Warning lights flashed across multiple stations. "Hull breach in Section 4. Wei reported. "Automatic seals engaged, but we can't take another hit like that." "Chen," Jackson's voice was urgent now. "Got it." She slammed her palm onto a final control, and the crystalline core of her device began to pulse with energy that somehow seemed both brilliant and dark simultaneously. Around the Artemis, reality rippled. The pursuing Krell fighters suddenly found their weapons failing, their navigation systems giving false readings, and their communications descending into meaningless static. "It's working," Chen exclaimed, her eyes wide with both triumph and disbelief. The quantum disruption field is establishing faster than I calculated. The Artemis surged upward, leaving the confused Krell fighters behind. As they broke through the upper atmosphere into the vacuum of space, the true scale of the invasion became clear. Dozens of massive Krell warships hung in orbit, systematically targeting Earth's infrastructure and military installations. "We're just one ship," Wei said quietly, staring at the tactical display. "Even with this quantum technology, what can we possibly do against all that?" Jackson shared a look with Chen, whose expression had shifted from momentary triumph to grim determination. "We can show them that humanity isn't as helpless as they think," Jackson said. "We can give Earth a fighting chance." He turned to the helm. "Set course for the largest concentration of enemy vessels. Let's see what the Quantum Vanguard can really do." As the Artemis accelerated toward what seemed like certain destruction, no one on board could have predicted how their desperate gambit would change the course of the war and humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The turn of the tide. In the cold vacuum of space, the Artemis moved with unexpected grace for a vessel never designed for combat. The quantum field surrounding the ship shimmered like oil on water, bending light and reality in ways that made it difficult for Krell targeting systems to lock on. 3 enemy interceptors, coming in fast at Mark 270, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the tactical station. The young officer had been part of NASA's security detail, never expecting to find himself in the middle of an interstellar war. Commander Jackson studied the tactical display, noting how the Krell ships moved in perfect formation. Too perfect. "They're operating as a single unit," he observed. "Their coordination is almost mechanical." Dr. Chen looked up from her workstation, where she monitored the Quantum Vanguard systems. "That fits with what we're seeing in their communications. It's not just encrypted, it's quantum entangled. They're sharing information instantaneously, which means they can respond to our movements before we even complete them," Captain Wei added grimly. "No wonder our conventional forces couldn't touch them." Jackson's eyes narrowed as he watched the approaching fighters. "Unless, Doctor, can your device disrupt that entanglement?" Chen's fingers flew across her interface. "Theoretically, yes. The quantum field should interfere with any entangled particles in its radius. But I'd have to recalibrate the field harmonics, and we've never tested it at that frequency." "Do it," Jackson ordered. "Why, bring us about. Let's see if we can isolate one of those fighters from its companions." The Artemis pivoted smoothly, its experimental engines allowing maneuvers that would have torn conventional spacecraft apart. As they closed with the Krell formation, Chen's modifications to the quantum field began to take effect. The results were immediate and dramatic. The perfectly synchronized Krell formation suddenly fell into disarray. 2 of the fighters collided, their pilots seemingly confused by the loss of their shared awareness. The third veered wildly, its weapons firing at random. "It's working," Chen exclaimed. "The entanglement is breaking down within our field radius." Rodriguez looked up from tactical, his expression one of cautious hope. "Commander, I'm detecting communications from Earth. Multiple resistance groups are reporting that Krell ground forces are showing similar disorientation in areas where they've deployed our portable quantum disruptors." Jackson nodded. Before leaving the mountain base, Chen had distributed smaller versions of her device to remaining military units. Each had only a fraction of the Vanguard's power, but together they were creating a network of disruption zones across key battlefields. "Send them the frequency modifications," Jackson ordered, "and get me a direct line to General Hammond, or whoever's in command at the moment. They need to know we found a vulnerability." In the makeshift command center buried beneath the ruins of Geneva, General Hammond stared at the incoming data with the first glimmer of hope he felt in days. "You're telling me that one experimental ship is actually hurting them?" he asked the communications officer. "Yes, sir. The Artemis is reporting successful engagement with multiple Krell vessels, and the portable disruptors are proving effective against ground forces, especially when deployed in overlapping fields." Hammond studied the global situation map. Red indicators showing Krell-controlled areas still dominated, but blue spots of human resistance were growing, particularly where the quantum disruptors had been deployed. Get every available engineer and physicist working on producing more of these devices, he ordered. And I want constant updates from the Artemis. They've given us an opening. Now we need to exploit it. Back aboard the Artemis, the initial euphoria of success was tempered by a harsh reality. The quantum field was taking a tremendous toll on the ship's power systems, and the Krell were adapting. They're adjusting their formations, Y pointed out as they observed a new group of enemy vessels approaching, maintaining greater distance between ships to minimize the impact if one goes offline. And their flagship is changing position, Rodriguez added, indicating a massive vessel that dwarfed the others, moving to a higher orbit, outside our effective range. Jackson frowned. The Krell weren't panicking. They were regrouping. They're learning. Chen hadn't left her station in hours, her eyes red-rimmed from fatigue and stress. Commander, I've been analyzing the sensor data from our encounters. There's something interesting about their flagship's energy signature. She sent the information to the main display. Complex waveforms scrolled across the screen, most meaningless to anyone without her specialized knowledge. See this oscillation pattern. It's consistent with a massive quantum computing core. I think it's the central node of their entanglement network. She looked up, her fatigue momentarily forgotten in the excitement of discovery. If we could disrupt it, we could break their entire command and control system. Jackson finished, immediately grasping the implications. Exactly. But we'd need to get much closer than we are now, and the Vanguard would need to operate at power levels we haven't tested yet. We looked skeptical. The ship's power systems are already strained. Push them further, and we risk a catastrophic failure. And that flagship is surrounded by a defensive screen of at least 30 combat vessels, Rodriguez pointed out. Even with our quantum advantage, those are impossible odds. Jackson studied the tactical display, his mind racing through scenarios. Earth couldn't win a war of attrition against the Krell. They needed a decisive stroke that would cripple the alien force in one blow. What if we don't fight our way through? He said finally. What if we slip through instead? Chen leaned forward. You mean intensify the quantum field to the point where we could phase through their defensive screen? Is that possible? She hesitated. Theoretically, the Vanguard manipulates local reality at the quantum level. With enough power, we could create a temporary state where the Artemis exists slightly out of phase with normal spacetime, essentially becoming partially intangible. Like a ghost ship, Y murmured. But, Chen continued, it would require channeling virtually all of our power into the Vanguard. Life support, engines, everything would be operating on emergency reserves only. And there's no guarantee we could reestablish normal phase once we're through. Jackson weighed the options. A frontal assault would be suicide. Retreating meant abandoning Earth to a slow, certain defeat. This desperate gambit was the only choice with even a chance of success. How long would you need to make the necessary modifications? He asked Chen. 4 hours, minimum. And we'd need to find somewhere to hide while I work. The Vanguard will be offline during recalibration, leaving us vulnerable. Jackson nodded. Rodriguez, find us the densest debris field within range. Asteroid fragments, destroyed satellites, anything that might mask our signature. We're really doing this? Wei asked quietly. Jackson met her gaze steadily. Unless you have a better idea, Captain. She didn't. The modification work proceeded faster than expected. Chen's team had been studying the theoretical possibilities of the quantum vanguard for years, and now necessity was turning theory into reality at an unprecedented pace. Hidden within a field of debris that had once been Earth's orbital defense platforms, the Artemis underwent its transformation. Power conduits were rerouted, systems were stripped down to minimal functionality, and the crystalline heart of the Vanguard was reconfigured to channel energy in ways its designers had only speculated about. During a brief rest period, Jackson found Chen alone in a small observation room. staring out at the stars and the occasional flash of distant combat. "Will it work?" he asked simply. She didn't turn from the viewport. "I don't know. The math says yes, but we're so far beyond established science that math is almost a courtesy term for what I'm doing. You don't sound very confident for someone betting humanity's future on this plan." Now she did turn, and he was surprised to see a smile on her exhausted face. "That's the thing about science at this level, Commander. It's not about confidence, it's about wonder. What we're attempting shouldn't be possible. If we succeed, we're not just saving Earth, we're rewriting our understanding of reality itself." Jackson hadn't considered that perspective. To him, the quantum vanguard was a weapon, their only effective one against the Krell. But to Chen, it represented something more profound. "And if we fail?" he asked. Her smile faded. "Then at least we failed reaching for the impossible, rather than waiting for the inevitable." Before he could respond, the ship's comm system activated. "Commander to the bridge," Wei's voice announced. "We're picking up unusual activity from the Krell flagship." On the main display, the massive Krell vessel was surrounded by a swirling energy pattern that hadn't been there before. "What are we looking at?" Jackson demanded as he entered the bridge. Rodriguez shook his head. "Unknown, sir. The energy signature doesn't match anything we've seen from their weapons or propulsion systems." Chen was already at her station, analyzing the data. "It's a quantum field," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "Similar to the Vanguard's, but on a much larger scale. They're generating it deliberately." "Could they have developed a countermeasure to our technology?" Wei asked. "No, this is different." Chen's fingers flew across her controls. "Based on these readings, they're not trying to disrupt quantum fields. They're trying to establish a stable one around their flagship. Almost like they're preparing for our attack." Jackson finished grimly. "They know what we're planning." The implications were chilling. If the Krell had somehow anticipated their strategy, the element of surprise, already thin, was gone completely. "How?" we demanded. "There's no way they could know about our modifications." "Unless they've been observing us more closely than we realized," Rodriguez suggested, "or they have technology that lets them predict our actions." Jackson made a decision. "We move now. Not in 4 hours, not when we're fully prepared. Now. Whatever they're doing, we need to strike before they complete it." Chen looked alarmed. "The modifications aren't finished. The phase shift might not stabilize properly." "It's a risk we have to take," Jackson insisted. "If they complete whatever they're building, we might lose our only chance." Around them, the Artemis hummed with tension as crew members prepared for what might be their final mission. The quantum core pulsed with energy, its crystalline structure now reconfigured into something that even Chen admitted she didn't fully understand. As they set course for the heart of the Krell fleet, Jackson addressed the crew one final time. "What we're about to attempt has never been done before. The odds are against us, but then, the odds have been against humanity since the moment the Krell arrived. Yet here we are, still fighting." He paused, looking at each face on the bridge. "Whatever happens next, remember this: when faced with extinction, humanity didn't surrender. We reached beyond what we thought possible and grasped at the very fabric of reality itself." With those words hanging in the air, the Artemis accelerated toward the Krell flagship, its quantum field building to unprecedented levels as it prepared to attempt the impossible, to become a ghost ship sailing through the enemy's defenses to strike at their very heart. Humanity ascendant. As the Artemis approached the Krell defensive screen, the quantum field surrounding the ship intensified. The view through the ship's sensors became increasingly distorted, normal space appearing to fold and ripple around them. "Phase shift initiating," Dr. Chen reported, her voice tight with concentration. "Quantum field stability at 87% and fluctuating." Commander Jackson gripped the arms of his command chair. "Hold course. All power to the Vanguard." Throughout the ship, lights dimmed as energy was diverted to the experimental system. Life support reduced to minimal levels, causing the temperature to drop noticeably. In engineering, Captain Wee supervised the dangerous power transfers, knowing that even a minor miscalculation could tear the ship apart at the quantum level. First Krell defensive line in 3 seconds, Rodriguez announced. Everyone on the bridge held their breath as the Artemis encountered the outermost layer of Krell vessels. On the tactical display, enemy ships moved to intercept them, weapons charging. Then, something extraordinary happened. The Artemis passed through a Krell destroyer as if it were made of mist. "It's working," Chen exclaimed, her eyes wide with amazement. "We're phase-shifting between quantum states." From the perspective of the Krell, the human vessel seemed to flicker in and out of existence, becoming partially transparent before resolidifying elsewhere. Their weapons fired, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through the Artemis's semi-corporeal form. Jackson allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. "Power fluctuations in the quantum core," Chen warned. "The field is destabilizing. We can't maintain this state for long." "How close are we to the flagship?" Jackson demanded. Rodriguez checked his instruments. 2 minutes at current speed. "But sir, something's wrong. The flagship's quantum field is pulsing, almost like it's in rhythm with ours." Chen's expression changed from concern to alarm. "They're trying to synchronize with our field frequency. If they match it perfectly, they could pull us back into normal phase space," Jackson realized, right in the middle of their fleet. The race was now against both time and the Krell's rapidly adapting technology. The Artemis pushed forward, its engines straining as they maintained speed while operating on minimal power. Around them, the enemy formation tightened, guided by the flagship's increasingly accurate quantum pulses. 1 minute to target, Rodriguez reported. "Field synchronization at 60% and rising." "Reroute emergency power reserves to the Vanguard," Jackson ordered. "We need to stay phased until we reach that flagship." Warnings flashed across multiple consoles as critical systems went offline to feed power to the quantum core. Artificial gravity failed in several sections of the ship. Emergency oxygen masks dropped as air recycling systems shut down. "Field synchronization at 75%, Chen warned. 80, 85. The ship shuddered violently as reality began to reassert itself around them. The ghostly silhouettes of Krell vessels became increasingly solid through the viewports. 30 seconds to target, Rodriguez called out. Jackson made a split-second decision. "Dr. Chen, prepare to invert the field polarity." She looked at him in shock. "That would collapse our phase state immediately." "Exactly. But it would also disrupt their synchronization attempt." "Do it on my mark, then immediately reinitiate our original field configuration." It was a desperate gambit. If the timing was off by even a fraction of a second, they would rematerialize inside a Krell vessel, or worse, half inside and half outside, with catastrophic results. 10 seconds to target, Rodriguez announced. "Ready for field inversion," Chen confirmed, her fingers poised over the controls. 5 seconds. 4, 3. "Now," Jackson commanded. The quantum field collapsed and inverted in an instant. The Artemis snapped back into normal space with a thunderous shockwave that rippled outward, disrupting the careful synchronization pattern the Krell flagship had been generating. "Reinitiate phase shift," Jackson ordered. Chen slammed her hand down on the controls, and the quantum core surged with the last reserves of the ship's power. The Artemis phased out of normal space again, just as Krell weapons locked onto their briefly solid form. The maneuver had worked. They had broken the enemy's synchronization and gained precious seconds, but it had cost them nearly all their remaining power. "Field integrity critical," Chen reported, her voice barely audible over the alarms now blaring throughout the ship. "We're losing phase coherence." "Distance to target," Jackson demanded. 500 meters, Rodriguez answered. "We're practically on top of it." Through the distortion of their failing quantum field, they could now see the Krell flagship, a massive structure of impossible geometries and pulsing energy conduits. At its center was a brilliant core of light that seemed to bend reality around it. "That's it," Chen breathed. "The quantum computing core. The nexus of their entire command network." Jackson had seconds to make a final decision. They couldn't maintain their phase state long enough to pass through the flagship's hull, deploy a weapon, and escape. "Prepare for emergency materialization," he ordered. "Direct course for the quantum core." The implications of his command were clear to everyone on the bridge. They would drop out of phase space at the last possible moment, rematerializing on a collision course with the heart of the Krell flagship. "Sir," Wei's voice came over the comm from engineering, "if we rematerialize and impact at this velocity—" "I know, Captain," Jackson interrupted quietly. "But our quantum field will interact with theirs. Dr. Chen, what would happen in that scenario?" Chen's eyes widened as she calculated the possibilities. A cascade reaction. The collision of two artificial quantum fields would create a rupture in space-time itself. The energy release would be incalculable. Would it destroy their command network? It would do more than that. It would shatter it across every possible quantum state. Their entire fleet would be left blind and uncoordinated. Jackson nodded. "Send all data back to Earth. Make sure they know what we found and how to exploit it." "Transmission complete," Rodriguez confirmed solemnly. "Field collapse in 10 seconds, Chen announced. 9, 8. Jackson opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is Commander Jackson. In a few moments, we will strike at the heart of the enemy that threatened our world. Remember this: humanity faced extinction and chose to rewrite the rules of reality itself rather than surrender. Whatever comes next, know that your sacrifice has given Earth a fighting chance." 3, 2, 1. The quantum field collapsed. The Artemis rematerialized inside the Krell flagship, its solid matter occupying the same space as the alien vessel's quantum core. For a fraction of a second, the laws of physics fought to resolve the impossible contradiction. Then, reality broke. The rupture was visible from Earth, a blinding flash that momentarily outshone the sun before collapsing into a swirling vortex of energy that consumed the Krell flagship and several nearby vessels before dissipating. Throughout the solar system, Krell ships suddenly lost coordination. Their perfect formations disintegrated into chaos as the instantaneous communication network that bound them together shattered. In command centers across Earth, military leaders watched in astonishment as the invincible enemy suddenly became vulnerable. Krell ground forces, cut off from their command hierarchy, fell into disarray. General Hammond stared at the tactical displays in Geneva, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. "The Artemis?" he asked quietly. The communications officer shook her head. "No signs, sir, but their final transmission contained everything. The quantum disruption frequencies, the weaknesses they discovered in Krell technology, everything we need." Hammond closed his eyes briefly, honoring the sacrifice. Then, his voice firm with resolve, he began issuing orders. "Deploy all remaining quantum disruptors according to the Artemis data. Target isolated Krell units first, and get me a direct line to every resistance cell. Tell them the tide has turned." The next 48 hours witnessed a remarkable reversal of fortune. Human forces, though still technologically outmatched, exploited the Krell's sudden vulnerability with devastating effectiveness. The portable quantum disruptors, now calibrated to the exact frequencies discovered by the Artemis, created zones where Krell technology failed completely. More importantly, humanity had learned to fight as one. National differences had been set aside in the face of extinction, and now that unity was bearing fruit, guerrilla tactics, combined with precise application of the limited quantum technology, steadily pushed the invaders back. 3 days after the Artemis's sacrifice, an unexpected transmission was detected from the largest remaining Krell vessel. For the first time since their arrival, they were requesting communication. In a hastily reconstructed UN chamber, General Hammond and representatives from Earth's remaining governments gathered to receive the message. The Krell commander that appeared on screen was different from those they had glimpsed before. Older, its gray skin marked with symbols that might have been rank or accomplishments. "Humans," it began, its voice translated by computers, using data from previous Krell transmissions. "You have done what no species has achieved in 700 cycles of conquest. You have broken the Nexus." Hammond stepped forward. "We defended our world against unprovoked aggression. We'll continue to do so for as long as necessary." The Krell made a gesture that might have been acknowledgement. "The imperative requires that I inform you of certain truths. The invasion of your world was not conquest in the sense you understand. It was evaluation." A murmur ran through the human delegation. "Explain," Hammond demanded. "The Krell Dominion does not expand randomly. We seek species with potential, those who might one day challenge our supremacy among the stars. When such a species is identified, they are tested. Most fail, accepting subjugation or fighting with predictable strategies until they are defeated." The alien's eyes seemed to gleam with something almost like respect. "You did neither. When faced with superior technology, you created your own. When faced with defeat, you rewrote the rules of engagement. The quantum weapon you deployed against our flagship should not have been possible for a species at your development stage." Hammond's expression remained stony. "If this was a test, what happens now that we've passed? The test of ascendance has existed for millennia. Those few who pass are recognized as equals, potential rivals, yes, but also potential allies. The Krell Dominion hereby acknowledges humanity's right to exist independently and to develop without interference." The human representatives exchanged glances of disbelief and suspicion. "You expect us to believe that after all the destruction, all the lives lost, you'll simply leave?" Hammond asked incredulously. "We will withdraw all forces from your system within one planetary rotation," the Krell confirmed. "But before we depart, we offer knowledge as recompense for the trial you endured. The basics of quantum field manipulation, interstellar navigation, and temporal mechanics, enough to accelerate your development by perhaps a century." "And in return?" Hammond pressed, still suspicious. "In return, remember that the galaxy is older and more dangerous than you imagine. Remember that you are not the first species to face the test, nor will you be the last. And remember that when the time comes, you may be called upon to stand with the Krell against threats that would consume us all." With those cryptic words, the transmission ended, leaving Earth's leaders to contemplate a future none of them had dared imagine just days before. A future where humanity took its place among the stars not as conquests, but as equals. 1 month later, Dr. Maya Chen stood on a platform in what remained of Washington, D.C., accepting the highest civilian honor a grateful planet could bestow. The Quantum Vanguard project had been declassified, and the sacrifice of the Artemis and her crew was now known worldwide. As she looked out at the crowd, people from every nation standing together, she thought about Commander Jackson's final words before they lost contact. "Whatever comes next, know that your sacrifice has given Earth a fighting chance." They had done more than that. They had given humanity a future among the stars. After the ceremony, General Hammond approached her privately. "The new Quantum Defense Initiative needs a director," he said without preamble. "Someone who understands both the science and the stakes." Chen smiled sadly, thinking of the friends she had lost aboard the Artemis. "The Krell said they were testing us. Do you believe them?" Hammond considered the question carefully. "I believe that in trying to destroy us, they revealed our greatest strength. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humanity doesn't just fight back, we evolve."